Hey everyone, it's great to see you all again. If you recall in last week's video, I took you with me on my recent trip to Yosemite National Park in California. And if you haven't seen that vlog yet, I would highly recommend checking it out. I'll have it linked up here or up here. I think you would really enjoy that. But there was a certain photo from that trip that I didn't talk much about that I really want to bring more attention to. More specifically, the technique that I used to capture that photo. And that technique is exposure bracketing. So in today's video, we're going to go over what exactly exposure bracketing means, when you should exposure bracket a photo, and why it's so important to know how to do it. So I hope you all enjoy. First off, what is exposure bracketing? In essence, exposure bracketing is when you take multiple photos of the exact same scene, usually using a tripod, at different shutter speeds or exposure settings, and blend them together to capture the complete dynamic luminance range of a photo. For example, this is the image I'm going to be talking about today. Again, this is from Valley View in Yosemite National Park. Absolutely gorgeous sunset. But if you know much about the scene, the sun is actually setting behind me, and that's why we're getting such great color in front of me, and it is just touching the tips of the mountains. So this is the final edit and the final image. However, I did use the exposure bracketing technique to achieve this. So how you'll know if you need to exposure bracket a photo is when you have a wide range of luminance contrast or bright and dark areas that you're not able to capture their full detail in one exposure. So as you can see with this scene, if you know much about the location, the sun you can see is actually setting behind me. The sun is actually touching the tips of the mountains up here and it's setting behind me. So that means that all of the sky, that's why we have such that beautiful color in the sky and on the tips of the mountains. But that means that I'm actually in shadow where I am right now. So if we look at the original photo, if I would have just taken a single exposure, this is what the single exposure was. And as you can see, I also, not only did I have to bracket this photo, but I also had to focus stack. So if you want to learn a little bit more about focus stacking, I do have a video that I'll link up here as well. You can go check that out after this one. But you can see that even though the foreground is perfectly in focus and exposed correctly, the sun and the sky is completely blown out, and actually there is some detail that we can get back in the highlights. However, there are more dramatic cases where you have no detail left in the highlights. And how you'll know if you have no detail left in the highlights is that if you look on your histogram, either on location, you definitely want to look on location, you'll see that this right side is all the way pushed up to the right. That means there is completely no detail. It is true white and it will not come back even if you pull down the highlights and whites all the way. There's no detail left. So that is a way, and same with the blacks. If your blacks or darks are all the way to the left, there is completely no detail in some parts of your photo. So that's when you know you're going to have to exposure bracket to get correct exposure. So on location, what you're going to want to do is take multiple images of the same exact scene, usually using a tripod. And usually your camera actually has a setting. For example, on Sony cameras, you click the shooting mode, and then you'll have single shot shooting, high continuous shutter, and then a couple other options. One of those options is going to be continuous bracket, and then you can choose whether you want 0.5 of a stop, 1 stop, 1.5, 2 stops, or 3 stops. I usually just opt to go for the full 3-stop exposure bracket so I get the most out of my image. And basically what that's going to do is that it's going to, when you hold down your shutter, it's going to continuously take 3 photos right away, one at the exposure you have set, and then like this, it takes 3 stops under, which correctly exposes the sky. We get all of that detail back in the sky, and then 1 over, which balances out the 2. If you were to just exposure blend these 2 images, it would turn out very, very dark. So you want to bring that last exposure back in to grab all of the details in the dark shadows. And so it's actually a very, very simple process. But what you're going to do is you're going to upload all of your photos into Lightroom, and then you're going to click on the first one and then hold shift and click on the last one. Then you're going to right click, go up to photo merge, and then HDR. And what that's going to do is that that's basically going to merge all of your exposures together. Lightroom's going to do usually a very great job of just blending your photos together so you get the full dynamic luminance range that you want out of the photo. So here is the dialog box. It usually doesn't take very long, so you could go through these settings depending on how your photo is. Mine, I used a tripod for this, so the auto align feature I have on, but it doesn't really do much because all of the photos are really the same. Auto settings, if you really don't know where to start with editing a photo, this is a great way to start. As you can see, it does a pretty decent job. That'll just affect the basic sliders, and so that's not going to do any of the masking or anything like that, but this gives you a good base to edit your photos. And as you can see already, we just have all of the detail in the sky and all of the detail in the foreground immediately brought back when creating a exposure bracketed image. This next setting is going to help with ghosting. So if there are parts of your photo that are maybe incorrectly blended together, this is going to help you basically take away that ghosting or incorrect exposure stacking that Lightroom maybe made the mistake of. But in my photo, as you can see, again, since I had all the exposures at the same exact spot, it's going to be pretty easy to blend all of them. And then I always try to create a stack. So this is the completely exposure bracketed image. And like I said, you can go through and edit all of these settings, knowing that you have all of the highlights intact, all of the shadows intact, and all of the information in the midtones as well. Not only that, but it creates a completely separate DNG file to make your edits on. So if you want to go back and exposure blend again and compare, you could also do that. But like I mentioned before, I actually had to focus stack this image as well. So what you do there is that you exposure blend at each focus point, and then you blend all of those separately together, select all of those HDR DNG files together, and then focus stack them in Photoshop. And again, I'll have my focus stacking video linked to this video if you want to go check that out. But here is the final image after focus stacking, exposure bracketing, and putting my edits on. As you can see, we have full clarity and sharpness throughout the entire scene, and all of the highlights are preserved, all of the shadows, all of that detail in the shadows. I can bring that up as much as I want, and as you can see, it's just bringing back all the details because of the exposure bracketing we did. And as you can see a little bit here, if you bring it up too much, that second setting in the HDR menu is going to help a little bit with that. Obviously, I wouldn't bring up the shadows that much anyway, but that is what that second setting is going to help with. So you may wonder to yourself, why don't I just do this all the time so that I know I have correct exposure? Well, one, you have to remember that you're going to be taking multiple raw photos of the same scene, so it's going to take a lot of storage. And two, most of the time, it's just not needed. I shouldn't say most of the time, but a lot of the time, it's just not needed. Using your in-camera's histogram is going to be your biggest friend on location, and that's really going to tell you whether you need to exposure bracket or not. So the rule of thumb is if there's anything on your histogram that's all the way to the right, peaking at the right, or all the way to the left, peaking at the left, and you can't get those both inside the histogram at the same time with the same exposure, you're going to have to exposure bracket. So I hope you all learned something from today's video. I know this is something to experiment with, and you'll get better and better at recognizing what scenes you need to use it and what scenes you don't necessarily need to use it, but I hope this video helped. But other than that, if you could subscribe to my weekly newsletter, I'll be posting weekly updates. I also have print sales and new galleries available on my website and collections. I know the Yosemite collection just came out, as well as a few others. And then for daily updates, you can like and follow my Facebook page. And those daily updates aren't just photography based, they're also life updates and also some interactive posts for you all to engage with and talk to each other. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.